Isn't it pretty? The first snowfall of the year is always really... Wait, this isn't the first snowfall of the year. This is April 21st, 2021. What's going on with the weather? Good morning, everybody. It's Stephen here for Bland Designs, and welcome to my weekly vlog for Monday, April the 26th, 2021, and it's day 411 of COVID. So it's hard to believe that we're almost to the end of April and moving into May. And of course, here in Ontario, we are still in lockdown, sort of. We'll be coming to that in a few moments because I have a few things to say about, well, the lack of leadership in this province. But before I get onto that, let's talk about current projects. So I'm working on two quilts at the same time. One quilt is called a Potpourri Quilt, and what it is, it's one that's all done in my embroidery machine. It's a series of blocks that have embroidered flowers in the center of them, and I think it's coming out quite nice. Ouch, I just stabbed myself on a pin. So here are some samples right here. I just have them pinned to this board that I use as a sort of a mini design board. I think I've got about 9 of them done now, and I think there's about 21 in the set. Each one takes a while to make. They take about 45 minutes a piece to make, depending on the intensity of the embroidery. But I think they're going to be really quite nice. And I am using K-facet fabric to border all of them because they have a sort of floral motif in those as well, and I just like the colors. So I think this is going to be a really bright and colorful quilt, and it's really not going to be a quilt per se. It's going to be more like a wall hanging. Depending on how big it gets, we'll see what happens from there. But it's already quilted too. I don't know if you can see a close-up of one of these thing. You can see here the texture in the background on the white. That's all done in the hoop as well. So they're already pre-quilted in a sense, or as we call it in the quilting world, quilt as you go technique. So that's one project. The other project I'm working on is a more traditional style of quilt. It's called Strong and Free. It's by Paul Leger, who designed it for Quilts of Valor, the Canadian branch. And I've had this pattern for a while. And I know Paul because I belong to the same Facebook group as he does, the Canadian Male Quilters, or Canadian Men Quilters, I believe is what it's called. And yeah, there's a giant half maple leaf in red on that quilt that has to be appliqued. I cut that out yesterday, and there's a lot of half square triangles, so I've got those made, but there are some other pieces yet to be made before I can put the whole thing together. I'm a little worried about the applique because I've never appliqued anything quite this big, but I should be okay as long as I make sure it's securely attached to my foundation piece. So, two quilts at the same time. There we go. Okay, moving on. The YouTube channel of the week. Another one of the men that were doing a little bit of a YouTube hop back a few weeks ago. And this one is Justin Wray, I think is how you say his name. And well, I did a little review of his YouTube site as well. His YouTube channel is another one in my series of male DIYers and crafters. And this one is called Justin Wray. That's the name of the YouTube content provider, and he does a lot of DIYs for home decor, and a lot of them are based on finds that he has gotten from Dollar Tree in the States. And by the way, the Dollar Tree in the States always seems to have a better selection of things than we seem to have in the Dollar Tree in Canada. Just saying. But if you're looking for some neat ideas and you're on a budget, again, I think he's got some very interesting things. He's also got some very interesting techniques that he uses with paint and with other decor items that you may have in your crafting stash. So if you want some inspiration, check out Justin Wray. So you will find the link to Justin's YouTube channel in the show notes below. You'll also find a link for Stephen and Walter Live. We talked a little bit about Canadian rednecks yesterday, so if you didn't catch that, you may want to pick it up on the replay. There's the latest edition of the Idiot Quilter and of So Chatty. Both of those are linked in the show notes below. Also, I have put in a link for the next Craft and Chat. You know, that's where we get together the first Wednesday of every month and just work on whatever we're working on and chat a while for, you know, for an afternoon. So if you're interested in that, the link is below. Now, I've put the link in a week in advance because it doesn't happen this Wednesday coming. It happens on May the 5th, which is the first Wednesday in May. But it's there for you now, just as a reminder. And I'll be putting that link up in this week's Idiot Quilter and in Stephen and Walter Live next week, and probably next week's vlog too. Everything that comes before that Wednesday, it'll be there, so you can't miss it if you're interested. And something else you may have noticed, my lighting is different. I have, and I'm trying to keep the reflection off my glasses, and that doesn't seem to be working very well, but a little brighter, I think. I have two lights on either side of me right now. I bought these from Amazon, and they didn't cost me a lot of money. They were about 60 bucks, the two of them. They came with stands and the whole bit, and different colors of filters. I've been playing around with them yesterday, and today is their premiere use, and I'm hoping this will solve some of my lighting problems that I have in this area. So that's why things should be looking a little bit more bright. And sorry about the reflection off my glasses. Okay, so that takes me to what's pissing me off this week. Well, basically, it's simple. It's what's pissing most people off in the world and have been since the dawn of time, and that's the lack of leadership that we have. This whole COVID experience has definitely exposed the weak links that we have in our government, and quite frankly, they're all weak links. Now, I said some time ago when I got on my soapbox and ranted about our government in this country, both at the federal and provincial level, that basically anybody who goes into politics is there to make money. They don't really go into it for the right reasons, okay? And I'm sorry, but I'm sticking to that belief, because I have yet to meet a politician who is in politics simply because they want to do right by the people that they are leading. They're there for the nice pension, for the paycheck, for the little preps that go along with being in a position of power. That's all it is. Okay, I'm sorry. And if this is, and if you didn't believe this, you should believe it by now, because look at the way the leaders in our world have handled the whole pandemic. They haven't got a clue. They don't know what they're doing. They are great at giving us statistics every day. They're great at saying they're moving funds to this and funds to that. But the end result is our cases are on the rise in our province and in our country. Look at India right now, okay? Now, I suppose a lot of people consider India a third world country, at least from our perspective here in North America. But you want to know something? Canada is pretty much a third world country as well. We're just hiding behind the disguise of economics and the Americans thinking that we actually are very modern and very up with everything. Well, our government hasn't done a thing. They've just thrown numbers around, that's all. Our cases in Ontario would not be as high as they are now if our government had acted. Our government reacts, it isn't proactive. It left everything open right back. Well, we were warned. The medical community warned us that when we got into the third wave, it was going to be the worst of all the waves so far. And they're right. They told us how many numbers were going to go up. They told us that our healthcare system was going to be overtaxed and the whole bit. And our government chose to ignore that and do nothing and just give us platitudes to live by. Well, platitudes don't save lives. I'm going to get a t-shirt with that written on it. You know, they've done nothing, and now they're in a bind. So the leader of our government, of our provincial government, Doug Ford, he went hiding for a couple of days, claimed that he came into contact with somebody who had tested positive for COVID. So he was self-isolating. No, it was getting really hot in the legislation with the opposition just going down their throat about their lack of response to this whole crisis and how they have screwed up the logistics of distributing the vaccine. And so he went into hiding for a couple of days and used the excuse that, well, had to isolate because he came into contact with somebody on his staff that tested positive for COVID. He himself got a test and he came out negative. He can also still do his government job and show up at our legislature via virtual. They've been doing that, so he could do it. Ironically, this all fell a couple of days just before he was having a great big huge $1,000 a spot Zoom money-raising campaign for himself and for his party. Yeah, okay. It doesn't take brain surgery to put two and two together and realize who's looking after whom in that case, right? But this has happened at our federal government as well. The only difference between the federal government and the provincial government here is that the leader of the federal government, Justin Trudeau, he's smart. He knows how to use his charisma to pull the Canadian people in. At the first of the COVID crisis, I said I was really glad that we had Justin Trudeau as our Prime Minister, and I still am. I still like Justin Trudeau. But now I'm a little tainted because all he's been doing is fighting with the provincial governments. The provincial governments want more of this and more of that. Trudeau's saying, we've done this, we've done that, you need to do this, back and forth, back and forth. They should be working together, not against each other. And that's the whole problem with COVID anyways, in terms of politics, because all of these leaders are only concerned about how they can use whatever they think they've done for COVID in the next election to get put back into power, stay in power, or get into power. That's all it is. So there's a whole lot of rhetoric going on, and there's a whole lot of people dying because of that rhetoric. They've done next to nothing. So basically, if we're going to survive this thing, it comes from us, the grassroots. Yes, listen to the health authorities, not the government authorities. The governments should be shutting us down, at least in Ontario, much more rigidly and enforcing it than they have been. I know there's financial and logistical problems to what I have just said, but that doesn't matter. It isn't my job to figure that out. I am not in a position of power and leadership. They are. That's why we put them into power, because we trusted that they would do the right thing by us. Well, guess what? If you hear a promise come out of a politician's mouth, you know it's a lie. So that's the state we're in right now. That's what I'm pissed off about. I will not forget when the time comes to go to the polls again, and I think there'll be a lot of people in the world, or in my province anyways, that won't forget. We'll remember, I hope, how we have been lied to, how we have not had any support from the government, and all we've listened to is platitudes and statistics. And they're not getting my vote. What else can I do? Okay, moving on. Let's talk about product. Well, I already told you about my studio lights. And yes, the studio lights I bought were cheap. But you know, if they do the job, they do the job. And I think they're doing the job. So I'm happy about that. The other thing I did was, some time ago, when I first got into quilting, I got fascinated by fabric, of course. And you know my fascination with fabric. And I designed some of my own fabric. Now, at the time, I didn't know what I was doing. I submitted some of my designs to some of the big producers, and well, I either heard nothing from them or I got the standard, thanks very much, we'll put you on file. Yeah, I understand why now, because I really haven't got a clue about fabric design. And I've kind of decided that's not the avenue I want to pursue. But some of the fabric that I designed is still available to me and to anybody else that wants it on Spoonflower. And if you don't know what Spoonflower is, it's basically you send anything into them and they'll print it on anything. They'll print it as fabric, they'll print it as fat quarters, they'll print it as wallpaper, wrapping paper, whatever. And there was one particular design that came from my art journal book that I really liked. And I used it in one of my earlier quilts well, I thought I should order more of it. And this is what it looks like. And I really like it. Now, I don't know, I ordered 4 yards because it is American, so I had to order in yards. I ordered 4 yards of this. It's not particularly cheap, although because I designed it, they give me 15% off. And I'm going to do something with it at some point in time. I don't know what. I want to look for some of the things in my stash to see that will go with this, and then see if I can find a pattern that will sort of show off the design of this at the same time without being overpowering. So anyways, I did that. It's mine, it's original, and I'm very proud of it. So that's the only things besides the lights that I have bought this past week. Oh, I ordered some socks from Amazon. Not Amazon, from Costco. Those came, and and some batteries. Wow, whoopee whoopee. But you know, just as a little aside here, it's kind of interesting that even though we're supposedly in lockdown, you can only go out to get essentials like food, I can still do a lot of shopping online. And I don't think that's going to change once we get out of this. I think a lot of people have explored the possibilities of what it is you can order online, and I think that's going to continue. It is for me anyways. I mean, I was doing it before the pandemic, but I've done it even more now. I mean, I always say, a day without a delivery from Amazon is a day without sunshine. That tells you how often I order from Amazon. Okay, so what's next? Oh yeah, next story about my grandmother. Let's have some coffee, shall we? This one I call Stray Dogs, Cats, and People. My grandmother was a very giving lady, although she had a rough exterior. She could scare the bejesus out of you if she wanted to. And you didn't fool around with my grandmother either. If she had a product she bought that wasn't working the way it was supposed to, or if someone had screwed her around on one thing or the other, she went into action. Now, you have to remember, these were the days before the internet, so that constituted mail or phone calls. And my grandmother was great on the phone. She'd call them right up and give them proper you-know-what. There were no flies on my grandmother, I can tell you that. And I think I inherited that ability to, you know, complain. I guess that's what it is. I mean, I don't like to use the word complain because it's really, it's going out there and fighting for, you know, something you feel, fighting for justice for an injustice kind of the thing. Anyways, my grandmother was very good at that. And my grandmother, people who didn't know her would think she had a very cold exterior. Well, she was far from that. My grandmother would take in, for an example, any stray dog that came to her door, she would feed. In fact, the dogs in the neighborhood, even the ones that did have homes, knew where to go for a free handout, because in the evening, in around 5 or 6 o'clock at night, all these dogs would come to her door. And there would be 5, 6 at a time, and they were not fighting or, you know, barking or anything like that. They just came and they sat by the door because they knew that in a few minutes she would come out with great big pans of food. Now, they were scraps that she was giving them, and she mixed them up with, I think she bought some dog food in cans and stuff like that. She'd mix it all together. Definitely now I know where the term a dog's breakfast comes from, because not appetizing, but the dogs seemed to like it. And so they did, but they knew it. And my grandmother loved animals, even though she stuffed them. Well, that's, you know, you heard that story. But it wasn't just dogs, cats. Cats would come as well. Sometimes there would be dogs and cats together, and she'd feed them all. She wouldn't bring them into the house. She didn't adopt them, but she'd feed them. And that was just out of the goodness of my grandmother's heart, because she could not stand to see an animal suffer. But she was that way with people as well. There were some people in the town she lived in, a small little community, that really needed help. They had fallen on hard times. They weren't really street people that I remember, but they were people that, you know, didn't have a lot, and lived in, you know, they might be boarding in somebody's house, they had a room or something like that. My grandmother would take them in, and she would give them a job. I don't know how she afforded it, because my grandparents were not rich people, but that was just the way my grandmother was. And she'd have them help her with housework or laundry or with cooking or something like that, and she'd pay them. She would make a point of going out and taking some, there was a couple of elderly ladies, Mabel and I forget the other one's name. I just remember Mabel because, you know, you don't hear that name every day. And yeah, Mabel was the daughter, and she lived with her mother, and her mother was Mrs. Haynes. I think that was it. Mrs. Haynes and Mabel. And my grandmother would take them shopping every now and then. Now, these ladies were a lot older than my grandmother. I don't know, to me they seemed ancient when I was a kid, but there were many times when my grandmother would take them out shopping, or she would pick things up for them. Again, out of the goodness of her heart. My great Aunt Bessie, who I didn't really know very well, was a school teacher, but she was an itinerant kindergarten teacher. She would travel to wherever she had to teach, and I don't know if she taught in the same school for all her life or moved around, but I always remember that she lived up the street from my grandmother, but she was only there in the summer. During the school season, she was in another town. It seemed to me miles away, but it probably wasn't. It was probably like half an hour away or something like that. And at the beginning of the summer vacation, my grandmother would go and move Aunt Bessie back into her house. She would pack up she would pack up all her stuff. She didn't have that much with her because she boarded in a room in a house while she was teaching. And my grandmother would go and pick her up and her stuff and move her back home. And then when it came time for the school year to begin, just before, my grandmother would move her back. Again, even though she was a relative, and it's hard to tell what this relationship was because basically she was my great Aunt Bessie. That's going back a couple of generations for sure. Her husband, my great uncle, had moved out west. I think he had gotten married at some point and had 2 kids, but when I was doing genealogy, I could find out very little about that. And he moved back to Ontario, to this house, and he married Bessie. Now, how they met, how that all happened, I don't know. I don't remember my great Uncle Charlie because I think he passed away before I was born. So, but I did remember Aunt Bessie because she was a real kook. But I'm getting off topic here. My grandmother looked after her. My grandmother would do this all the time for all kinds of people, strangers. Now, here's something that, you know, this might seem a little racist, but you have to picture, this is the 1960s, okay? In the town my grandmother lived in, there were very few black families. And so that was, you know, in Eastern Ontario, kind of a thing, somewhat rural community in its attitude and things like that. But I remember there was several black ladies that my grandmother employed. Now, I'm being careful here. Not slavery or anything like that. She paid them a fair wage. She looked after them. She helped them out. They needed help. I'm not sure why. But she did. And it had nothing to do with, there was no race at all. My grandmother didn't care what color you were. She would help you out. Now, I do know there was a few and they used to call them the girls. And I think these were a bunch of ladies that I think some of them may have had Down syndrome. They may have been mentally challenged or something like that. Still in the 1960s into the 70s, you know, people were still using the words you shouldn't use for people that have those that condition. And but my grandmother didn't. She used them as well, employed them as well to help them out, because there'd be a lot of people that would stay far away from them. That's just the way she was. That was the kind of lady she was. She did a lot of things that no one knew about. And a lot of those things didn't come to light until after she had passed away. People loved my grandmother, but that was because my grandmother helped. She did things in the community. She was a leader. You know, maybe she should have gotten involved in politics. But anyway, so stray dogs, if you're a stray dog, a stray cat, or a stray person, my grandmother was there to give you some help as best she could. Another thing about my grandmother that made her unique and special to me. Okay, so that takes us to the 3D corner. Some more coffee. And what do I want to show you? Well, what have I been making? I made this. We are starting some of our garden in the house, of course, like lots of people do, from seeds. And when I say garden, our garden is a container garden on our deck, and we had such great luck with it last year, we wanted to expand it this year. So Walter's already started some lettuce seeds, and we've got other seeds to start. Well, I found this on Thingiverse. It's a seed starter. You know, one of those little pots. It's got 12 slots in it. there's 12 spots in here to put your seeds and your dirt in. But this is self-watering. Yes. In these corner parts, there's slope down and there's holes down in the bottom corner of it. And so the idea is you plant your seeds in the center sections and you just drop some water down in these little corner ones and it waters everything. Now, he hasn't used it yet. It is kind of tiny, but then seeds are tiny, aren't they? So I don't know. I could make it slightly bigger, but that's one of the limitations you have with a 3D printer. You can only make things as big as the bed, as they call it, the build plate. So anyways, made that. So there's a useful print, okay? And then I saw this cute little flower pot, and I thought this flower pot would make a nice little pin cushion if I reduced the size of it slightly. So I did, and that's what I made. It's an owl, and I did them in the rainbow filament, and I made him into a pin cushion. Little novelty pin cushion. I think he's kind of cute, and he turned out pretty nice. So, and I'm thinking, hey, make nice little gifts too. They take a while to print, but you know, plan ahead. So that's what I've been making in with my 3D printer. I've been working on trying to design a little caddy thing that has a pin cushion on it and some little things to hold clips and tools that you reach for frequently. And I'm still working on that design, so I'm not going to show you anything about it yet, but when I get it done, I'll let you see it. So, and I've got a whole list of other 3D prints that I want to do that just look like fun. So, you know, I'm always having fun with a 3D printer. Now, I also follow YouTube channels and some Facebook groups that talk about 3D printing, and I'm hearing a lot of people are having problems all the time getting their bed to level. Now, for those of you that don't have a 3D printer, 3D printers are not plug and play. You have to put them together from a kit, usually, and there are some things you have to do to get a print to work. And one of those is leveling the bed. And this is where the plastic is laid down. And if it isn't leveled, your model, whatever you're creating, is going to go very badly for you. So there's this method where you drop the extruder head, or the hot end they call it, that's where the plastic comes out, and you put a piece of paper underneath that nozzle and between it and the bed, and you've got to adjust. There's little wheels that you adjust on the side that raise or lower the bed until you get it to where it has to be. Now, this is not an exact science, and when I first got my 3D printer, it was extremely frustrating. I would literally spend an hour trying to level my bed. Well, Now I do it in seconds because of practice, because I know how it should feel. And so that's been great. But a lot of people are still struggling with it. Now there are devices you can buy called BL Touch that you can attach to your printer, and it's supposed to help you level the bed. But from looking at what I've seen about those on YouTube and on Facebook and on the net in general, I don't think they're really worth the money. Now some people would argue with me that they are, and that's fine. Whatever works for you. But what works for me is simply to heat up the bed first, get it to the temperature I have to have the bed at, then I auto home the hot end, which means it goes to its starting position. Then I stick my little piece of note paper underneath that and I adjust the wheels slightly. And you don't need to turn them that much to get them, and those of you that have 3D printer know what I'm talking about. And when I think I've got it fairly well leveled, then I turn the temperature on to the hot end, because that changes things. And you listen. And when you drag the little piece of paper under it, it should have very little resistance, and you will hear almost a buzzing sound, like a vibrating sound, when the paper is sort of rubbing up against the nozzle. When I hear that, I know it's pretty much leveled the way it's supposed to be. I do lay down a layer of glue stick. I just use, Elmer's washable glue stick for kids. I give it a good layer of that, and that helps the first layer of your print stick to the bed. And that first layer is the most important. If you get that right, then you'll probably be okay with the rest of the print. And that's all I do. So I have my routine with that. But a lot of people are still struggling with that kind of thing. Maybe I should do a video showing how I do it and put it up. But there are so many videos that, this method I'm using is not unique to me, but it works for me. So anyways, I just thought I would talk about that, because I know there are some of you that have written me comments saying that you're kind of in the market for a 3D printer, but you're, a little hesitant to get it because of the things you've read about the problems. And yes, there are problems, okay? But those problems can be overcome. It just takes patience and practice, and you'll get it right in no time with it. I don't regret buying a 3D printer. I'm having so much fun with it. So that's it for today on 3D Corner, I guess. So that takes us to another project, and that is my Rolodex book. I showed this to you back a few weeks ago when I first had it done. Well, now I'm going to show you how I made it. And it's essentially taking a book, an old book, folding up the pages, making it look like basically a Rolodex, and then you can use it for all kinds of things. So here's part one of my Rolodex book. So I thought I might make something that's very trendy right now, and it's called a Rolodex book. And basically it's a variation on the idea of making an altered book. So I have already started this, and here's my book, and I went to Value Village and picked up a couple of old hardcover books, as you can see here on the back. And I just folded the pages, and I'm going to show you how I fold the pages in a moment. It's very, very easy. So you get this like Rolodex effect. Now the one problem you're going to have once you have the pages folded is how to keep it open so you can display it on, say, a bookshelf or something like that. So what I did was I created a couple of 3D brackets. These are basically shelf brackets. They're called Victorian shelf brackets, and I like the design. It gives it sort of an old-fashioned look, and that's what the pages of this book look like. So I simply printed those out on my 3D printer, and I hot glue gunned them to the bottom and to the side of the book. Now you'll notice that there's a gap here at the back because these brackets were at right angles, and so the book would have been sitting very straight up, and I didn't like that look. I wanted it to lean back a little bit. So I just positioned the book and hot glued it at the point there, and that keeps it open on this angle, as you can see. So that's my basic structure. Now, just before I go on with this, with my ideas for this, I'm going to show you very quickly how to fold the pages in a book. So Here's another book, very similar to that one. You can use any kind of book you want, but I would recommend a hardcover book. And you want one a fairly decent size, although you can make them smaller and larger. It's up to you. But this size, I think, works very nicely. And as I said, I just bought these books at the local Value Village, so they cost me next to nothing. And one thing you might want to do is break the spine. And what I mean by that is just fold it back in several places. It'll make folding the pages just that much easier. And it will, again, depend on how many pages are in the book that you are using. So basically, I have broken the spine so that the book lays flat open that way. So you're just going to take it, and right from the very first page, you're just going to fold it in half. Now, you may want to use a bone folder on this. Let me find my bone folder. Here it is. To give it a good crease. And I'm using the edge of the book, this edge of the spine, as my guide for keeping the pages straight. Now, if you wanted to, you could fold these maybe a third of the way. It depends on how much you want to hang out. But I find that this secures it the best. And you just carry on doing the same thing. Yes, this is going to take you a little bit of time, depending on how many pages, but actually, it's not difficult to do, and it moves fairly quickly once you get into it. Now, the one problem you're going to have is that as you get more and more pages folded, these ones that you've already folded are going to flop around in your way. So what I did was I just took a binder clip and clipped it. And you may need several binder clips, and as the book gets thicker and you're getting up to things like this, you may want to put the binder clip on several groups of pages to keep it open. You could possibly put a rubber band around this as well to temporarily hold it. It's up to you. Now, do you need to glue any of these? No, you do not need to glue these pages. You can if you want to, but I think that's a bit of a waste of time for that. And so you'll just continue folding all the pages until, you know, you get what I have here. So this is going to be your basic foundation, and that's pretty easy. Now, what I want to do next with this is start to embellish it. And I'm going to concentrate, first of all, before I even think about what's going to go in here, I'm just going to start, you know, doing a few things to side pieces. Add some things up here on the top, maybe some decorative paper. And I have a few different 3D embellishments that I've printed out that I'll want to alter. I have these little corner pieces right here, and they're going to fit right on there. I'm going to glue them. I'll probably use my glue gun for this, but I may use a combination of various glues. And I also printed out in the same copper these little 3D pieces that I might sit in here. These are chess pieces. I don't know. I just thought they were kind of neat and might look nice sitting on the edge of this. What I'm going to put inside of this, I don't really have a theme. So I pulled out a basket of ephemera, and it's various things. There's cards. I thought about doing a game theme because I'm using chess pieces, but I don't know if I will. I pulled out some postcards and some journaling cards, some butterflies, some of Tim Holtz's, you know, what he calls these, found people, or paper dolls, and just some other things. I also have a couple of these little replica, they're not kits, they were ephemera that I bought when last time I was in England at one of the museums, and they're historical reproductions of things about different topics, and I may go through those, and maybe some of these little papers that are in here would look good on these pieces here. I've even got some cards as well, some little miniature letter cards and things. I just grabbed things that I thought would look interesting hanging out of the pages of the Rolodex book. So I'm not really working with a theme. It's going to be a very eclectic collection. So as I said, the first thing I need to do is prepare these pages here and do some embellishing on the side. I'm thinking I printed these out. I'm thinking I might add these little corner elements on here as well, just to give it a little bit more dimension and you know, a sort of an antique-y look. So that's what. So what is just decorate the basic outside of this, and then we'll go from there. So what I've done is I've added some of these old reproduced newspaper pieces that are already sort of in this aged look to the top and the bottom of the book, and I went around the edges with some Distress Oxide ink, and I also used the Distress Oxide ink on the edges of the book pages and along the top, just to give it a little bit more of an aged look, although the original pages already had a bit of an aged look to them. And what I've also done is I've got my trusty glue gun out here, and I have glued on each side these little 3D printed brackets that I had. And I am thinking of giving them a little touch of gold paint on them to, you know, highlight them a little bit more. And then I have these 3D printed end pieces here, or book corner pieces, which I think I'm just going to glue to each corner of this book. And again, I may go over them with a little bit of gold paint. So I'm going to take my glue gun, and I'm just going to add just a little bit of glue on the inside. That's a little bit more than I needed. And then just put it right here on the corner. That should hold it. Now, one thing about glue guns that I really hate are those little stringy parts that come from your glue. And I have found one of the ways to get rid of those is after you've glued your piece on, and I've got that one on now, that corner. And although I don't have any real glue strings there, maybe one or two, I'm just going to take my heat gun and I just very quickly go over. And the strings will just magically disappear. So that's one way of combating glue strings. So I have another one of these down here. And these are designed so that you have sort of a hollowed spot, so they fit right very nicely on the corners of this book. That was just a serendipitous kind of thing, because when I printed these out, I didn't know that that's how they were going to work. I got a little glue squeezing out from the side here, so I'm just kind of picking it off. And the last corner piece. Boy, I hate glue strings. I really do. And there we go. Just give it a quick blast here to get rid of those glue strings. Okay, so now I have my corner pieces mounted, as you can see. And so I think I'm going to just touch them up with a little bit of gold paint, if I can find my metallic paints with this. And I'll do the same to these side pieces as well, just to give them another little bit more texture and a little bit more of an antique-y look, and try to keep away from the plasticky look and make them look a little bit more like they're metallic. So I'll do that and show you the end. So I took the corner pieces and the side pieces and I sort of antiqued them using a combination of some of the gold paint, and then I went over it with some black Memento ink
just to age it a little bit and look like it was worn on the edges. And then I found this little embellishment in my stock of chipboard pieces and added some of the bronze and an iron metallic wax to it, and then went around the edges with the black Memento ink as well, just for something to make it stand out a little bit more. Now, of course, I'm nowhere near finished this yet. I need to do more embellishing and figure out what's going to go in these little slots and things like that. But that's my foundation in this part of the process, and we'll build upon that as time goes on.
Now, something else that I've been working on, experimenting with, and I'm just in the early stages of this experiment. I saw a lady who is a textile artist. She was showing how she basically takes pictures and she does this unique thing that gives them texture, and then she either sews them into sort of a wall hanging or puts them on canvas or whatever. So it's kind of taking my love of textile arts and mixing it with my love of mixed media together. So I am experimenting on this. Essentially what you do is you take a piece of what's called tearaway or cutaway stabilizer. It's stabilizer you usually use when you're doing some embroidery. It holds your stitches and you put it underneath the fabric. What she does is she takes a sheet of this and she takes some flexible, light molding paste, something that we use all the time in mixed media and in art journaling. And she spreads that very thinly onto the tearaway stabilizer. And she texturizes it. Now there's many, many ways to texturize, and if you do mixed media, if you do art journaling, you know about these techniques. You know everything from putting a rubber stamp into it to drawing lines and things in it with, you know, a palette knife or a paintbrush, pressing things into it, that kind of thing. So that's what she does, using a stencil on top of it. And then she lets it dry. Now again, she makes sure that anything that she raises off the surface of the tearaway stabilizer is not very high, because this is going to go through your printer. Yes, it's going to go through your printer. And that's the part I found kind of unique. I never thought of putting molding paste on something and then running it through my printer. So, but before you do that, first of all, you have to let it thoroughly dry. Thoroughly dry. Okay, then you can colorize it. You can do a color wash on it using acrylic paints or inks or whatever you have. Again, let it thoroughly dry. And then she used something called digital grounds. Digital grounds is a product that allows, when you put it on a porous or non-porous surface, it will allow your ink from your inkjet printer to basically adhere to it. Again, you put a thin layer of that down on top of this substrate and let it dry thoroughly. I keep saying thoroughly because you could wreck your printer if any of these things are still a little bit on the dampish side. So make sure they're thoroughly dry. And then you take a picture of your choice, put this in your printer and print it out. And so here's one. This is me as in a Picasso kind of thing, but you can see there is texture. And this is something that the camera doesn't pick up all that well. Also, I did colorize this and then I printed this in color on it, and that might be taking a little bit away from it. Here's what I did with some flowers, a picture of some flowers. And again, you can see better the texture on this. Now I'm experimenting right now with some other types of medium. I've got one that's got sand in it. I've got another one that has glass beads in it. So I'm trying those, and I haven't printed anything on those yet. I need to do a little different type of print as well, different picture. I might do something in Photoshop that's more layered with it. But these are just experiments right now. Now, am I done with these at this point? No. I'm going to take these to my sewing machine and I'm going to do some thread painting on these using some of my decorative stitches or things like that, and just see what this turns into. It's something a little different, and who would have thought? Now I'm thinking, well, could you not use this technique on like cardstock? Now I don't know if the cardstock's a little thicker than this tearaway stabilizer, so it might not go through the printer. I don't know, but I might give that a try too, because if you can do it on cardstock, then there you go. You've got another kind of element that you can add to your art journal or make a canvas or whatever. I just found it really fascinating the way she does it. Now, mind you, her stuff is very elaborate as well. In fact, she had a DVD that came out in 2012, and I went to the site and I bought it. It was downloadable. It was like $11 Canadian or something, and that's where she tells you about this different technique. Now I'm trying to think of what her name is, and for the life of me, I can't remember. If you follow Lisa Walden on YouTube, she's a lady in Australia who interviews textile artists all the time. In the latest one that she just had up, this is the lady, and it's worth watching with that too. If I can find it, I will put it in the show notes. Make a note to myself. Add Lisa Walden. Anyways, I'll put a link so that you can, and maybe put a link to this lady's website where she shows you how to do this technique or talks about it a little bit more, so you get a better idea of what the potential of this is, because it's something new. So anybody out there doing mixed media, this might be something you would be interested in. Okay, so what that takes us to is events in the past week. Hasn't been a lot going on. I think they're getting much closer to moving my mother into the new nursing home. There were new pictures put up on the website for the nursing home showing what the interior is looking like now that they have furniture in there. Very nice. Little concerned about where her TV set's going to go. The rooms aren't that big, but supposedly they're going to move all her stuff in, and I think they're going to look after the connection, so I guess they'll get that figured out. And I haven't been given a date yet as to when my mother's going to move in. However, they did put a picture up they had several pictures of the residents up on their Facebook page, and they do this on a regular basis. My mother doesn't usually get her picture taken. Now, that's not because they're neglecting her. That's my mother, I'm sure. I'm sure they come to her and go, "Oh, hi, Lorna, would you like to have your picture taken?" And she'd go, "Oh, not today, dear. No, not right now. I'm not feeling it," kind of a thing. Because my mother is camera shy. She doesn't like her picture being taken. I know how she feels, because I'm kind of the same way. Because there's always something hanging out of me when someone takes my picture. I'm like, whatever. But they had a picture of her on Facebook, and at the same time they also wrote this caption that said, "Getting ready to move some of our residents into the new home on May the 1st. Well, I don't know if it meant those were the ones going or not, but I haven't been given any indication as to when exactly this is going to happen. So I'm holding out and hoping this week. I mean, May 1st is this weekend. It's Saturday. So I'm kind of hoping that they send me something or whatever to let me know if this is happening. Now, it'll be nice once she gets settled into the new place, and once we can go back and visit her. My sister was asking me about that the other day, and I said, I have no idea. I don't think we're going to be able to physically be able to see my mother until we've had the second shot, and for us, the second shot doesn't happen until probably August. So we still have a few months to go yet. And that's all fine. They got to keep everybody safe. So that's the problem in our province right now, if I harken back to what I was ranting about earlier, is that people are rushing into things way too quickly, and that's putting our numbers up. You know, we have to be a little bit more patient, a little more time, okay? But anyways, so I want to show you the picture of my mother. So I'm just going to run over and get that, and I'll be right back. So this is the picture of my mother that they took. And you know something? That is a good picture of my mother. You can see in the background, that's what her room looks like right now in the old nursing home, and it's nice. And she's got her quilt on the bed there. That's one that my grandmother made. That's the Bird of Paradise, or Tree of Paradise quilt. And I really like this picture of my mom, because my mother was always get the glare off, always a bit of a fashion plate as I was growing up as a kid. My mother always knew how to dress. She always had impeccable hair, impeccable makeup, and she didn't look in those days anything like she looks today. Some of the other pictures they've taken of her in the nursing home have not been this good. They, for one reason or another, they make her look like, oh, basically a witch. But this one I thought was a very nice picture of my mom, because she's actually, something my mother doesn't usually do is smile a lot for pictures. Yeah, I like to think of what my mother looked like as I was growing up as a kid, because my mother was a very good looking woman, and people always complimented her on her clothing and her hair and things like that, and my mother liked that. And so this is, you know, a real change. She's not getting her hair, now her hair's looking pretty good right now. Somebody must have combed it for this picture. But she used to always get perms and her hair styled and the whole bit. She'd go to the hairdresser once a week and get it coiffed. And part of the thing with my mother's hair is it's thinning now. And her hair has just been over-processed with the chemicals they used in perm solutions, setting solutions, hair coloring, the whole bit. And, you know, it's now grown back out a little bit, and it's actually looking not bad in that picture. And so, yeah, I thought I'd print this picture out, and I just put it on this little clipboard. It hangs on one of my cupboards down here in my craft room. Got all those blocks that I was showing you earlier is falling over. So that's why I did this with it, because I really don't have any really decent pictures of my mother at the age she is now. So anyways, I thought that was nice. Yeah, so hopefully later this week or something, very soon, I'm going to hear about the big move. And then when my sister and I can actually go and physically visit her, we'll assess her room and talk to her about, you know, what she would like to, you know, make it a little bit more personal, you know, decorate it, things like that. I'm actually thinking about maybe making a small wall hanging style quilt for her room at some point in time, once I see, you know, what space is available for her. Just, you know, to make everything a little bit more cozy for her. But it does look fantastic. So neat, so clean, so new. It's going to have that new nursing home smell when she moves in there. And yeah, I hope she'll be happy in the new place. She'll find something to bitch about, but you know, that's my mother. So what else in this past week? Nothing. No, I've been busy doing my projects as I always am, but really there's been nothing else. And even, you know, I get a little antsy some days and want to go out because the weather's getting nice now. And we've yet to use our little hiking shoes. We must do that at some point in time. Maybe this week we'll get out and about for that. But yeah. So, okay. So that's the week that was. So that brings me to the end of today's vlog. And I hope you have a good week. And I hope everything in your world is on the up and up. Everything's looking better for us all. I hope you're happy. I hope you're healthy. Hang in there. We're getting closer to that light at the end of the tunnel, but we're still a ways from it. We will beat this thing in spite of our governments. And, well, have a good week, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.